Senior Services in Forsyth County, North Carolina presents Communication and Dementia. This presentation discusses the way dementia changes elements of communication and provides some recommendations and tips for better communication. This presentation has been pre-recorded and information about how to find help is included at the end of the presentation. Dementia is an umbrella term used to describe a collection of symptoms that are caused by disorders and diseases that affect the brain. It is not one specific disease. Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and mixed dementia are some of the over 400 types of dementia that we know about today. Dementia affects thinking, behavior, problem solving, executive function, and the ability to perform everyday tasks. Brain function is affected enough eventually to impact a person's ability to remain independent. In November of 1901, Augusta D., a 51-year-old female, was admitted to the Frankfurt Asylum in Germany and was put under the care of Dr. Alois Alzheimer, a biological psychiatrist overworking himself to process the grief of losing his wife. Augusta presented with paranoia, progressive sleep and memory disturbances, aggression, confusion, and the inability to recognize her husband or doctor until her death 5 years later. Dr. Alzheimer documented her case very precisely from the time of her admittance until her death on April 8, 1906. The significance of her case would not be recognized for decades. Dr. Alzheimer presented his findings of Augusta's autopsy during a scientific congress of German psychiatrists in the fall of 1906, but it was met with little to no response. However, Dr. Alzheimer's research mentor wrote about the case in his famous textbook Psychiatry A, 8th edition, which was released in 1910, and the term Alzheimer's disease became a diagnosis. However, in 1909, Alzheimer reported 3 other cases and a plaque-only variant in 1911, a case known as Joseph F. The science of Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias has come a long way since 1901. The electron microscope was invented in 1931, allowing us to do further study of the brain. Cognitive measurement scales were developed in 1968. Alzheimer's disease was recognized as the most common cause of dementia in 1976. The Alzheimer's Association was founded in 1980. The first Alzheimer's drug was approved by the FDA in 1993, and President Ronald Reagan was diagnosed with the disease in 1994. However, it wasn't until 1995 that Dr. Alzheimer's care notes for the first Alzheimer's patient were found, which fully confirmed her as the first documented case of Alzheimer's. Many wonderful things have happened since 1995, and I encourage you to look at the milestones on the website on the slide underneath Augusta D's photograph. To talk about communication and dementia, we need to understand what different parts of the brain does. Alzheimer's disease starts in the hippocampus, which is not shown on the screen. It's in the middle of the brain and is responsible for short-term memory. There is evidence that Alzheimer's disease starts up to 20 years before symptoms become apparent. Not all dementias start in the hippocampus. Lewy body dementia begins in the brainstem. Frontotemporal dementia starts in the frontal and temporal lobes. Vascular dementia starts at the place where blood vessels were damaged by a stroke or some other disease that restricted blood flow and oxygen to the brain, causing the death of brain cells. Where the disease starts can make a difference in the symptoms that are seen. As the disease spreads to other parts of the brain, more change is noticeable in the person. As we think about communication, different areas of the brain come into play. That new slang that your grandchild is using, that would be held in the hippocampus because it's new, not something you've experienced most of your life. As the disease moves into the temporal lobe, understanding and remembering language as well as hearing is impacted. In the frontal lobe, problem solving is impacted as well as speech. Impulsiveness is also controlled in the frontal lobe of the brain. The parietal lobe houses language and reasoning, and the occipital lobe houses sight and visual reception. When looking at this graphic, it's easy to see why communication is so difficult for your loved one living with the disease, no matter what type of dementia they have. And when it's difficult for them, it's difficult for you as well. According to Merriam-Webster, communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. Twins often develop their own form of communication before they learn language, and some use it throughout most of their lives. As babies grow, they learn communication by watching us. Our tone, inflection, and pronunciation helps to teach them not just the words we use, but the meaning behind them. Cultural influences teach communication as well. Your family's individual culture taught you about your family's communication styles. Collective culture, the culture of the community in which you live, taught you indirect communication and harmony. Think about this. How does an only child learn to share? Usually, it's practiced at home with the parents as the child grows. And then they hit kindergarten, and a whole different level of sharing is expected. This is a simplistic example, of course, but it is an example of how we learn language individually and culturally. The word share has different meanings in different environments. So how does the diseases that make up dementia impact a person's communication? We first need to think about communication as a two-way street. A person receives communication, but they also provide communication. And knowing how the disease impacts the person can help us understand how to communicate effectively, but also help us decipher what they are communicating to us. On the screen, you can see our new friend, Dr. Donald. Pay attention to his facial expressions throughout the presentation and see if you can understand what he is communicating. As we learned a minute ago, dementia impacts the brain, causing cells to die. As cells die in certain regions, various aspects of communication is lost. That means a person's sight, hearing, comprehension or ability to understand, expressions, the ones they give us but the ones they see too, are impacted. We already thought about how a baby is taught to communicate via familial and social interactions. As individuals living with dementia lose their ability to communicate, their social connections and emotions are impacted as well. Dr. Donald wants us to know that dementia impacts sight. First, we think about peripheral field loss. Take your hands and form pretend binoculars around your eyes, like the girl in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You eliminate your peripheral vision using this simple technique. Think about what you can and cannot see. Could you see someone coming up beside you if they approach from behind? Could you see your plate on the dinner table if it's sit right in front of you? Imagine how hard it would be to see things on the floor as you walk around the house. Dementia affects sight in this way and may contribute to inability to detect motion as well. Take a moment and look at the image in the middle of the screen. Would you feel safe walking down this street? Would you be able to tell where you live or what the closest address is? Dementia also impacts contrast sensitivity. Individuals may experience difficulty seeing objects of the same color, like an all-white bathroom or a black print on a red background. If those things that you perceive as four-dimensional are really one-dimensional, would you be comfortable going in, as we encourage our loved ones to do when it comes to the bathroom or even shower? Individuals living with dementia experience difficulty with depth perception. They have a harder time judging how far an object is and understanding changes in elevation, and differentiating between three-dimensional objects and flat ones, so the person may feel and look off balance. Differences between flooring, like a carpet that connects to a tile floor, may be perceived as a step up or down. One of the things I enjoy doing in my work is helping individuals living with memory loss to check in at the day center. I have witnessed many individuals living with dementia stop where the entrance flooring changes. They pick up their feet and step way over the line where a different type of flooring starts. I want to say a special note about glare. Be careful to reduce glare in any setting. Floors that are shiny may be painful to look at or perceived as wet by a person with Alzheimer's. Close the window blinds and consider covering mirrors in your room. A person with Alzheimer's disease may perceive another person and become startled. Dr. Donald is trying to hear his own heartbeat. Based on his facial expression, do you think he can hear it? Hearing loss can contribute toward dementia, but dementia impacts more than hearing loss. In peripheral hearing loss, damage in the brain can cause a person to be unable to detect and understand sounds around them. The sounds may be jumbled or muffled. They may not hear you if you are speaking behind or beside them. Because of central hearing loss and auditory deficits, they may have a hard time processing what they are hearing. A siren, for example, may startle them, or they may not recognize it at all. Cognitive strain, which is trying to understand what is being said, is extremely exhausting. Many times, a person may decide the conversation isn't worth the effort and withdraw. They may read the facial expressions of others and realize that they didn't hear the conversation correctly, or they said something that didn't fit, and they choose not to say anything at all. Isolation is common for those who cannot hear or understand conversations. Unfortunately, isolation can significantly impact both our physical and our mental health. If you are having trouble hearing conversations, especially in loud environments, or you are missing sounds you've heard before, please see an audiologist. Let's look at how hearing is impacted according to the most common types of dementia. Alzheimer's disease impacts hearing early by causing the person living with the disease to have difficulty understanding overlapping sounds or speech in noisy places. This could be in a busy restaurant, but also if you have multiple grandchildren who are all trying to talk at the same time. Frontotemporal dementia can cause a person living with the disease to react to voices, music, and background noise. In one type of variant, they may be unable to recognize a loved one's voice, and yet another variant causes difficulties with tone, pitch, and sound quality. Lewy bodies disease and Parkinson's disease can cause a person living with a disease to hear sounds that aren't there, like muffled voices or music. Sometimes these are referred to as audio hallucinations, and they may have a hard time understanding complex sound patterns such as music and speech when more than one person is talking or there is background noise. Sounds in the environment such as a busy street or even bird sounds that change pitch, tone, and rhythm can be overwhelming. Vascular dementia causes a person to have a hard time in busy, noisy places too. Let's think about the type of dementia that your loved one has. What type of vacation would be best for them? Would your brother with vascular dementia do well on a busy street in New York? Would someone with Lewy body dementia or frontal temporal dementia do well in New Orleans on Fat Tuesday? These are the types of things we must think about when planning to achieve success in communication, but also to have maximum quality of life. Dr. Donald looks a bit confused here. Dementia impacts the way a person thinks in that they are unable to comprehend complex communications. So your fast-talking, slang-slinging granddaughter may be popular on TikTok, but your husband may not be able to comprehend what she's trying to say. If your dad's nurse gives him instructions but adds in, yeah, okay, and other extra words, he may get tangled up as he tries to understand what's expected of him. Dementia impacts a person's ability to follow steps correctly. The most common example that doctors use is following a recipe. But I like to remind caregivers how complex taking a shower is. We take for granted that it's simple because we've been doing it since we were about first grade. But it took 5 to 7 years for our parents to teach us the steps and for us to remember them. I counted 20 steps the last time I showered. All those steps would be difficult for someone living with dementia to remember and comprehend. Metaphors can be tricky too. The metaphor, "a time is a thief," is an example that your loved one living with dementia may not understand. I'm not sure what Dr. Donald is being told on the telephone, but his expressions sure say a lot. Our expressions tell more about what we are saying than the actual words we speak do. Think about the last time you were frustrated with your loved one. Did you say anything? Did your face say something that you didn't want to verbalize? I'm told all the time that my face tells what I'm thinking, and I really have to think quickly to keep that from happening. Dementia impacts how your loved one perceives your expressions, but also their expressions too. I've heard caregivers complain that their loved one is just mask-like or that they have this blank stare. Some have even said that their loved one has laughed when they shouldn't have or said some things that were inappropriate. All of those are forms of expression. Because expressing ourselves is tied to multiple areas of the brain, different types of expressions are affected at different times. A person living with dementia may have trouble finding words or using the correct words. They may refer to a business by what it used to be in that location. They may repeat themselves or mumble. Certain types of dementia impact a person's expressions differently. People living with Lewy body dementia have been known to have less emotional expressiveness than a person living with Alzheimer's disease. When it comes to communicating with a person living with dementia, it's best not to rely on body language or expressions to get your point across. Use simple, easy to understand words and simple sentences. All behavior is a form of communication, especially in those who have lost language. Think about how frustrated your child was during the 2-year-old stage. The only word they knew to use to argue was no. The less we listened, the more frustrated they got, and the more we heard no. Sometimes they even threw a fit. Without language, how would you tell someone that something hurts, or that you're scared, or frustrated? How would you tell someone that you need to use the bathroom, or that it hurts when you go? What if you just wanted a hug? What would that look like to someone who wasn't in a hugging mood? How would you tell someone that you felt sick, or that you had trouble breathing? You would have no choice but to use behavior to get your loved one's attention. Let's try a chair exercise. Find a partner and ask them to sit in a chair, like the boy on your screen. When they try to get up, tell them no, sit down. As they try and get up multiple times, tell them no each time. Then, after a few moments, ask them how it felt to have their autonomy or freedom taken away. Switch places and repeat the game. Think about how many times your loved one with dementia is told to sit down and how frustrating that may get. Remember, they don't understand there's something wrong with them. How would you expect them to tell you that they didn't want to sit down any longer? Now that we know that communication completely changes when a person has a form of dementia, we need to think about what that means for their independence. We talked about how sight changes and peripheral vision is lost, and how that might impact someone walking down a busy street trying to find the address they need, but also how they might not be able to see a plate that's right in front of them. We also talked about how a noisy environment can impact everyone living with dementia, and how that may cause a person to isolate themselves. We know that comprehension changes when a person has dementia, and that rapid-fire questions, slang, or metaphors may confuse and agitate them. And we know that how a person with dementia expresses themselves and what they understand about our expressions is different. It's hard for us to remember all of this because a person with the types of dementia that are most common are adults. They've lived their entire lives communicating clearly and understanding even the slightest nuances of communication. And now, everything has changed, but they still look the same. When we talk about function, we are really talking about the activities of daily living. It's important for you to know what these are. As a caregiver, you will be asked many times about these. Remember to accurately describe what your care partner can or cannot do, and try not to give them extra credit. If they need help with something, it's okay to say they need help. Programs and services use activities of daily living to help determine who needs help the most. Giving your loved one credit for something they really cannot do on their own or without coaching will mean they score higher than they should. Giving them extra credit means giving you more work to do. As we go through each instrumental activity of daily living and the activities of daily living, thinking about what your loved one can or cannot do because of the dementia and how things might need to be tweaked to help them. Remember, we aren't talking about memory as a part of communication, but it certainly factors into the task we are examining too, especially if the task requires multiple steps. On the screen, we have listed the instrumental activities of daily living first. These are the tasks that we do around us to help us remain independent. If they lived alone, could your loved one maintain a clean and organized home? Could they call for emergency services if they need help? Can they prepare a meal for themselves or refrain from eating spoiled food? Can they shop for the things that they need, including understanding how to pay for those things? Can they navigate a transportation system, or should they be driving? Can they operate a washing machine and dryer using the correct form of soap and other needed products? Can your loved ones pay their bills on time and pay the correct amount? Bill paying is an area where symptoms begin to appear to family members first. Can your loved one remember to take their medication on time and correctly? This is another area families have reported seeing symptoms of dementia early on. Activities of daily living are the things we all do to take care of ourselves. Feeding ourselves is not just fork to mouth. It's also ensuring we eat the right kind of food for nourishment and that we understand foods that are bad for us, whether that means spoiled food, food that interacts poorly with our bodies, like sugar and those living with diabetes. Can your loved one dress themselves correctly for the season we're in? Or do they put on a parka on the hottest day of the year? This also includes picking out clothing that is appropriate, putting it on in the correct sequence, and changing clothes when they are dirty. Bathing we've already talked about. Some professionals say that a person doesn't need to bathe as often as we do in America. Is your loved one washing all of the appropriate areas correctly? Bathing becomes a point of contention between care partners in almost every type of dementia at some point in the journey. Toileting means can they tell when they need to go where they should go, not in a plant or a basket, and be able to clean up themselves correctly. Transferring is getting up from a chair and getting into bed or vice versa. And continence refers to utilizing continence products and cleaning up when needed. Now think about the elements needed to complete each task. The more tasks they need help with, the less independent they can remain. Also notice that driving is not on the list. That is because driving is impacted when executive function is impacted early in the disease. A driver needs to be able to respond in an instant to an unexpected stimulus. The inability to drive anymore has more to do with possibly hitting someone or something than it has to do with getting lost. So what can you do? How can you better communicate with your loved one and understand what they are communicating to you? There are a few things I can recommend, but first let me say this. You know your loved one best. Trust your gut and your instincts. Let's first think about environment. Look at the picture on the screen. Do you think that person who works there is frustrated? Could they perform their work easily? I would get overwhelmed very quickly with that many notes to review. In your loved one's environment, minimize distractions as best you can. Turn the TV down or off and be mindful of music playing when conversations are taking place. Don't get me wrong, music is a wonderful tool to use to help create a certain atmosphere or to redirect your loved one living with dementia. But it also might be overwhelming if too much is going on in the room or it's too loud. And we all love our grandchildren, but if they are running back and forth and yelling or slamming doors while they play, that might be a bit much for your loved one living with dementia. Try and maintain a calm environment with good lighting that won't create shadows or glare. Let's talk about physicality. Think about how things need to change physically in your interactions with your loved one. I would not recommend approaching them from behind, especially quickly. Do walk around them, squat down to eye level, and raise your hand or wave to get their attention, like the lady in the picture is doing. You can also gently touch them to get their attention if that doesn't bother them. Please don't ask them if they remember you. Do you remember is a trigger for those who don't, and little else makes a person feel inadequate. It's easier to tell them your name, who you are to them, and them to you. And remember to smile. It's the universal sign that everything is okay and they are safe. Let's think about speech. Remember to be clear and direct when you've gotten your loved one's attention. Speak slower than you normally would. Keep sentences simple and short. If you want their opinion, just give them two choices instead of a choice from a lot of different areas. Watch the tone of your voice and drop all the extras, the likes and ums and yeah. If you mess up, it's okay. Just try again and rephrase what you want to say. Give them a little extra time to process and respond without interrupting. Remember that correcting is to teach, and that the disease takes away the opportunity or the ability for someone to learn, especially new things. You aren't going to be able to teach a person with dementia much of anything at all. It's okay if they're wrong. Try stepping into their reality, seeing things the way they do. There will be much less conflict between the two of you, and you will enjoy your time together better. Let me also say a quick note about setting your loved one up for success. There are multiple tools that you can use to let others know that your loved one has dementia. The Alzheimer's Association provides a template of cards you can download and print, both for you and your loved one, to give out to individuals that you interact with. These are especially helpful if something is said or done that can be offensive, or if your loved one just needs a little extra time to process things before responding. Think about if your loved one goes on a walk and gets lost, and the police come to talk to them. Would the policeman give them time to respond to "What's your name?" before asking, "Where do you live?" We hope so, but we can't guarantee it. The links on the screen underneath the picture go to the page where you can download those cards I mentioned. Another resource you can use if you live in Forsyth County is called Forsyth Cares. This is a website where you can enter all of your loved one's information, and EMS workers in Forsyth County, North Carolina, can access it if they come across your loved one and he or she cannot respond. Outside of Forsyth County, North Carolina, call the non-emergency number to the police department and ask them how they'd like you to report that your loved one is living with dementia, so that all EMS responders will know. They will appreciate the heads up and the information about who to call to get help. Remember that body language tells your loved one more about what you are saying than your words do. Remember to smile, make eye contact, leave your arms open and your hands loose. In the pictures on the screen, you can determine the young lady's emotions by looking at her expressions. But with dementia, your loved one may not read the expression correctly. Verbally relay emotions that are important and clarify as needed. So let's pull it all together. Please understand that communication takes practice. Doing it well takes patience. You cannot control others' perceptions. And pardon yourself when you mess up. Because the truth is, the changes in communication are on you, the one whose brain is not impacted by dementia. You're doing a great job. How do I know that? Well, because you're learning and you're growing and you're adapting even now. And resiliency is the key to a successful journey with dementia. You don't have to be perfect. Just give yourself grace and try again. Thank you for your time and attention to this presentation. If you need more information or help with resources, go to the Senior Services Caregiver Resources webpage that is linked at the bottom of the screen. There is an abundance of information located there. And if you'd like for someone to contact you, complete the Request for Information form. Again, thank you so much. Have a great day.